Let's get started. So, quick reminder for those of you introducing yourselves, and if you want to use the chat at any point, please select all attendees or all panelists and attendees. We'll send the recording and the slides down later today. We have so much to cover that will probably go a little bit quickly. And then please fill out the survey at the end. This will be a huge opportunity for us to see what you're interested in, how you think it went, what we could have done better, etc. So thank you for all of that. So welcome to our 7th webinar, Making Smarter Decisions, How Folks Are Thriving in This Moment. A few quick notes. So one, thanks to my colleague Simone's hard work, this event is again approved for a CFRE credit for 1 hour, so 1.0 credits. So we know a lot of folks are working hard on professional development and getting that ready. More good news is that the first 6 webinars are also been approved. So we did that for a previous one, and then it took some time to get the other ones approved. But it means that if you've already gone through those, you can list them, or if you haven't, go watch the recordings. They're all on our resources page. We hope they're useful. People have said they are incredibly so, and this will be a way to knock out a bunch of CFRE credits as well as your home. And then we just added a question to the survey to certify participation. So that's something that we need to do, it says CFRE. So just make sure you make a quick note there. Pretty easy, that'll be a 1-minute survey. Today's agenda, as I said, we have a lot to cover. We'll do some quick reminders. We'll do some trends across the nonprofit sector, so you can think about benchmarking your own work. We'll do some tips and tricks for making smarter decisions. We'll share a lot of new ideas across the sector. We really doubled down on that this week. So many of you know this at this point. My name is Patrick. I used to run email fundraising President Obama, ran the innovation team at change.org, and now am the co-founder and co-CEO of FreeWill. Really fortunate, and one of the biggest things that's bringing me joy this week is working alongside this team of about 55 folks, mostly in New York City, where I am. One big highlight from our week is that we held our first ever FreeWill talent show on Zoom on Wednesday, and it was incredible. I played some piano pretty poorly. We had some accordion, we had a dance number, we had someone juggle, a banjo player, so much more, and it was such a highlight. So, and also with us are 300 nonprofit partners who are really joyfully supporting these days. We're also really, really lucky this week, again, like last week, to be joined by my friend and colleague, Virginia Fay. Virginia's our Director of Partner Success. We met her when we were all grad students at Stanford, and she was studying journalism. She's just been a rock for the FreeWill team, but also a rock for all the nonprofit partners we have, and has incredible expertise there. So she'll be sharing some of that a little bit later. Also, before we get started, a really big thank you to 100 people who joined Trivia Night last night. So we hosted Trivia Night both as a way to have fun and also as a way to model a virtual event. It was really great. We had such a good time. I hope if you joined, you had a great time. And we will actually be sharing all the slides from Trivia Night with you later, so that if you want to host your own, we've written the questions for you, created all that. It's really easy, pretty simple. Probably lasts about an hour, but it's just a great time and a really good way to connect with community. So feel free to use that on your own. Okay, let's talk about your week briefly. So one thing that's really nice to see is that happiness is really increasing across our community. And you can see how much it changes week to week. It's now the highest over feeling anxious. Loneliness is dropping. People are feeling pretty eager. Things that you're worried about this week. So we actually are seeing that dark green line, the sort of hunter green, that is the one big increase this week, is people are a little bit more concerned about their jobs. And so we'll share more about that in a moment, and something you can do to be extra cautious there. And then quickly, feedback from last week. So things that went well. People really love the sessions on Giving Tuesday Now and how to help people move into action on a pretty quick timeline. Really loved hyper-specific examples, and so we keep trying to work that in. Generally, the webinars and resources have been really well received. Someone described themselves as lost sheep, but I would give you guys a little bit more credit than that. And then people really enjoyed having Virginia. And so we're really thrilled to have her back this week as well. Things that could go better. So people said we could use more tips on using Zoom effectively. And we'll probably get to that in a future week. Once someone asked, why doesn't Jenny ever come to these? Patrick talks about how brilliant she is, but we never hear from her. So the quick answer there is that as co-CEOs, one of the things that makes this work really well is we're really clear on dividing responsibilities. So not only am I running the webinars, but I'm also really deeply focused on the nonprofit side, where while Jenny's being a wizard on the product and technology and making sure that the tools are excellent for users. But I hope that we'll have her on a future week, maybe in 2 weeks when we do some more work on how to have a productive team that is happy and effective. And then people keep saying, there are never enough examples. So we'll work on that. And we've actually added some more in a template on top of what we'll show you later today. 2 big urgent reminders that we want to make sure everybody knows about. The first is that Giving Tuesday is now next Tuesday. So it's happening 1 week. It's actually not too late to participate. There's some pretty easy ways to do it. This is a really good moment for planned and major giving to have an excuse to get in there and actually make a hard ask of folks. We also have provided a whole bunch of guidance in last week's webinar, but also things like email templates and phone scripts that you can use because we know you're scrambling to make this work. So don't forget that, really big moment. We think a lot of people are going to participate, but not everybody, as people try to get their stuff together pretty quickly. So it's a really good opportunity. If you can be one of the nonprofits that makes the most of this, it will have a big effect on the rest of your year. Second thing is that the CARES Act has more funding. So this is the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Act. And you want to apply for it. All nonprofits who are 501c3s, under 500 people, which is many of you, are eligible. So we've created a how-to guide. It's been viewed almost 10,000 times, but we keep updating it, and new funding was just released. Frankly, it's a messy process, but make sure that your CFO, your CEO, your ED, your president has this, and it's a huge amount of money. So it's up to 2.5 months of payroll for your entire team, or $10 million, whichever is less, and it's potentially all forgivable. So if you haven't looked into this, your organization hasn't, that's a huge mistake. Go take a look at it and share it. And as I mentioned, all 501c3 organizations are eligible. Unfortunately, if you're a C4 or a PAC, very few of you will be. That's not eligible. Okay, so one thing that people have really asked us about is, what are other organizations doing? And how are they surviving or not, or thriving in this moment? So we did a little bit of diligence, and we have some new data to share with you that we want to walk you through. First, annual giving. How's it looking? So overall numbers, 18% of organizations have said annual giving has gone up in the last month or so. 40% have shown a decrease, and 16% stayed the same. The reason this doesn't add up to 100 is because some people said they didn't know. So the sectors with the most increases, interestingly, are animals organizations, community organizations, usually direct service, or things like the Boys and Girls Club, and then community foundations. The sectors with the most decreases, though, are faith organizations. This is not surprising. You don't have folks in the pews every week. K through 12 schools, and human rights and civil rights organizations. On major giving, some similar numbers. So 14% increase, 27% decrease, and 36% stayed the same. So slightly lower numbers of decreases. Sectors with the most increases, again, animals, community organizations, and community foundations that are really kicking into gear now, which is interesting to see. Decreases, higher ed, environment, and faith organizations have also seen some drops in major giving. One thing to note that's actually pretty interesting to us when we look through the data is that organizations with between 1 million and 10 million in annual revenue actually saw the biggest increases in major giving. So I think those might be the organizations where one donor feels like they can have a really big impact at that 1 to 10 million round. And that's just something to take note of. So if you're in that category, you might think about saying, go to your key donors right now because you're seeing an increase across that portion of the sector. And then in planned giving, as we've talked about a few weeks, this is the area where we're seeing the biggest increases. So 23% said planned giving has increased recently, only 8% have shown a decrease, and 43% stayed the same. Biggest increases happen in faith, K through 12, and human rights, which is interesting because these are some of the areas that are weakened in other areas of giving at the moment. So it's a great time to really amp up the planned giving if you're in faith or K-12 or human rights. And then sectors with the most decreases, we actually didn't see many. So a smattering of folks that said a slight decrease, but overall really up across the board. We asked people whether or not donors have been more or less responsive to phone calls, and you won't be surprised to see that 57% of people said that donors are more responsive to phone calls. So if you haven't yet worked this into your repertoire, 57% have, only a small number have decreased phone calls. And as we mentioned almost 4 or 5 weeks ago at this point, this is a great moment to involve people who are not as busy. Maybe they're tour guides, maybe they're security guards at your museum, other people that might be underemployed at the moment. Having them call for stewardship conversations, checking in on donors is a really great opportunity. And if people seem open, you can have a professional fundraiser follow up with another call to actually make the ask. We also asked about people switching to video chats with donors. This was actually a little bit less pronounced than we might have assumed. So 34% said never, no video chats with donors at all. 25% said once in a while. 22% said sometimes. And then only 13% yes, as much as possible. Some people don't have one-on-one conversations with donors at all, so that was not applicable there. But we would a really good opportunity. Seen across the board, not just in fundraising, is that your older donors are really becoming more tech savvy week by week in this crisis, because this is the way they connect with their kids, with their neighbors, with their friends. And so one of the big outcomes of this whole moment is that you'll see a big leap forward on the tech savviness, not just of older donors, but also of organizations. And I'm sure you're seeing some of that with your own teams right now. And then we've asked how folks are changing their fundraising strategy. So 54% said more digital ways to give. 52% are doing more virtual events. 85% are increasing calls and emails to supporters. 4% are decreasing. We don't think this is a good idea, but they presumably have some good reasons for it. 64% are increasing social media presence. We're seeing a lot more social activity, especially among older folks. And then here are some really striking numbers. So we asked people whether their teams have been more or less productive working from home. 24% said more, 19% said less, 56% said stayed the same. So net overall, a slight increase in productivity. This is not what most people predicted, and not what we predicted for the FreeWill team either. But it's been true. It's just been a wildly productive time. We also asked people whether they've been more or less happy, and this was really striking. So 15% said more, almost half said less happy, which is pretty dramatic and not that great, to be honest. 35% said stay the same. So when we started working from home, we predicted less productivity, but not any change in happiness. And people were more productive and less happy immediately. And then we've done a lot of work internally to figure out how to turn that around. And it's gone really well. So not next week, but the following week, we'll share a bunch of the key tips that have helped everybody stay sane and really enjoy ourselves through this period. All right, let's talk about how to navigate better decisions in these chaotic times. And if you remember just a few slides ago, as we showed you, your own feelings changing week over week is pretty dramatic. And so it's not just that we have to get this right once with your supporters, you have to get it right on an ongoing basis. So a couple of tactics that we'll share with you in a moment. But when we ask people, do you feel like you have an understanding of your donors and how they're feeling in this moment? Only 31%, so less than a third said yes. 60% said somewhat, which is really sort of a no. And then a few people said no, or I'm not sure. So what we want to do is help you move a lot more folks into the blue and have the folks in blue feel like they know their donors inside and out as a way to really inform the decisions that you're going to make. Because if you go back a few slides to the moment where we saw major giving down, annual giving down. This actually contrasts with what we're hearing from donors in Poland. So Fidelity just ran a study, and most donors are going to keep their giving the same rate, and a bunch are increasing this year, more so than the number of donors that say they're going to decrease. And at donor advised funds, they're seeing giving off the charts now, even almost to a degree that it's more than last December, and December is giving season for donor advised funds. So the key here is if you can ask and ask in the right way, you'll probably be very successful because donors are primed to give. And the reason you'll miss your goals is because you don't know how to ask or you're feeling sheepish about asking at all. So a couple of tips on how to make that happen. 3 rules to guide your work in this period before we get into tactics. So the first one, and the most important one, is have a bias towards action. So when in doubt, do something. A lot of people are in the wait and see camp if you want to live it. It's the fastest path to missing your goals this year. And now more than ever, it's easy to sort of hem and haw and wait till something's totally perfect. Don't do it. Don't let the enemy be the perfect. Don't let the, perfect be the enemy of the good. And donors really value timeliness and authenticity over polish here. And we're seeing a lot of organizations nail that, and a lot of organizations make the mistake where they're just being way too slow. And then lastly is that you are going to make mistakes in this period, and that's totally fine. Set the expectation now of yourself, of your board, of your boss, that this is totally new for us as an organization, and we're gonna slip up, and that's okay. It's better to have a couple of mistakes than not enough action. Rule 2 is be an excellent listener. One of the key mistakes that people make is they decide for their donors what they're ready for. Or they let their boss or their board decide for their donors what they're ready for. If you have good listening skills as an organization, you'll have much better information. And you should assume that you are mostly going to be wrong about what your donors need at most times. But if you get the right data, you'll be able to make excellent decisions. So 3 rules. Third rule is just be a constant learner. The other mistake that we see people making right now is they think of 2019 as normal and they just can't wait to get back to it. Instead, think of last year as the past and not normal. 2020 is going to require you to learn even faster than you ever have. But also 2021 and beyond will be what we think of as a new normal and not simply a return to how things used to be. So you are going to have to continually shape your work, not just for 3 months to get through this, but literally going forward for the next 2-3 years as things resettle. Just a small anecdote, I was on a call yesterday with a bunch of senior business leaders, and one of them from MasterCard, who's measuring consumer trends across the country and talking to lots of other CEOs, said that airlines in America don't expect to be at 2019 levels for another 3 years. That's how long they think a return to full-blown domestic travel and international travel will be. 3 years. And so you can imagine how much will be shifting in the airline industry, and that will be similarly true in the nonprofit world. So get ready and ready yourself with this learning mentality that will get you a lot farther. So putting this into action, one of our favorite things to do at FreeWill that we were holding daily for a while is what we call what you hearing meetings. So what you hearing means what are you hearing? And what you want to do is have these at least twice a month. If you can have them once a week, it'll be an even better practice for you. But we know that not everyone has that kind of time. So at least twice a month. Here's what happens. Everybody who talks to supporters or donors should attend. Major gift officers, people doing stewardship, etc. Those are the people who are hearing directly from the horse's mouth. And then anyone with lots of data on supporter behavior. So if there's someone on your digital team or your annual giving team who can see trends over time, this will be hugely valuable. The goal overall is to just increase organizational listening and feedback, not necessarily have a big decision-making meeting. So let's just surface as much data and actual conversations for as many people as possible. Here's what a sample agenda looks like. So first, we just go around and everyone around the table gets to talk. What did we hear from donors or supporters this week? So That's most of the meeting is just recounting things and conversations that you've had. Talk to Mrs. Smith. She was bored out of her mind and really looking for things to do. I talked to Mr. Jones. He was a little bit concerned about his health, about his kids' health, but also still trying to figure out what the school was up to, and really wanted more ways to connect with people. And then secondly, and this is a much smaller portion of the meeting, what, if anything, should we do differently based on this feedback? So the real core is surfacing as much stories and feedback and conversations as you can from your actual supporters. A couple of key tips on how people get this right or wrong. First, no editorializing. So when you're recounting back the story you heard, just be as clear as possible. Use their own words. Don't layer your own opinion on it, because a lot of people have their own biases on what they think is happening and will layer it onto those conversations. And then two, the most important opinions here are from the people who speak to donors the most. So it's very easy to defer to senior people, but what you really want to do is have the most space for the people who are having the most conversations with donors, and we don't always see this happen. So really big moment here. So what you hear in meetings, schedule them. It can be half an hour, once every 2 weeks, but this will be one of the key things that will help you make smarter decisions. Something we're doing internally, and for FreeWill partners, we're launching with a lot of the folks this week, next week, the week to come, is something we call pulse check. And what we use is surveys and artificial intelligence to understand who in your donor base needs what. This might be giving readiness based on geography or gender or age and other things. It's a really important point to not treat your supporter base as a monolith right now as you think about how to talk to them. What this looks like is, these are some sample surveys, different behavioral analyses and psychographic information based on how people are reacting. What are they concerned about? What else is going on in their lives? What we can do is then score based on different types of demographics or trends, how ready people are for impact. And then lastly, figure out, okay, based on that, what does that mean for what people need in their lives? Is it more information? Is it impact? Is it connectivity? Is it joy? And what are the messages that will be most resonant there? Now, a lot of people aren't FreeWill partners, and that's also great. So what we want to do now is actually share how to hack this together at a somewhat less sophisticated level, but also much more quickly if you want to. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Virginia. Virginia, I'm giving you bravely the control of the mouse on my computer, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. I actually am not able to turn on my video. It says that I don't have permissions. So I'll go ahead and start talking if you want to see about maybe turning that on so that I can share my face as well. All right. Thanks so much for having me here, everyone. I am excited to talk a little bit about how to use surveys effectively. One thing to know about this breakdown is that these surveys are not really focused on lead generation. So that is one of the most common ways we hear about partners and nonprofit organizations using surveys. That's fantastic. The primary goal of this type of survey, though, is business intelligence. So understanding your supporters and what they need in this moment. So who should you be sending this survey to? We recommend sending multiple surveys on an ongoing basis to a small representative sample of your community. So to break this down into numbers, I think that my video just started working fantastic. So to break this down into numbers, what this means is that you want to send it to about 10,000 people or a third of your list, whichever is smaller, every month. The caveat here is that if you have kind of a jumbo list with hundreds of thousands of supporters, then you're actually going to want to send that to a little bit of a larger group, maybe 20, 30, 40,000, closer to about that 1/3 or 1/4 amount of your list. If your list is less than 10,000, if you're a smaller shop, no problem. Then you're just going to want to send it to your full list every 2 months. One of the questions that we get from nonprofits when we talk to them about using surveys is, are our supporters going to want to open this? Are they going to be annoyed that we're sending them these questions? The short answer is highly unlikely. Surveys have one of the highest open rates of types of emails. And if you're concerned about sending to the same group, 8 weeks apart, then just think about how differently you feel today than you did at, maybe February, a couple months ago. And I think it's safe to say that you'll get some new information and folks will be happy to check in again. All right. I am having just a little bit of trouble with the remote control. Sorry, Patrick.
Sorry. Try now.
It's not letting me control it, unfortunately.
Okay. I'll keep working it for you.
Okay, thanks so much. So how do you ask someone to take a survey? The main thing is that you want to be open and transparent. And you really want to make this about the donor and not about your organization. So you want to frame the ask as what you want to know about the donor and not how it's going to help your organization. We're going to go through specifics of what this looks like, but just remember this is, 101 nonprofit, keep it really donor-centric. You want the email to be really short and to the point. The main ask here is really just getting them to fill out the survey. It doesn't need to have filler information around it. It's best when it is a standalone call to action. And again, you really want to lead with gratitude for the respondent for being part of your community and reiterating how it's going to serve the donor. And you want to have a really clear call to action to make it very clear what you're asking them to do. And that's going to be the whole email. It'll then just have a sign off and we'll show you what this email looks like on the next slide. We also have this template available to you, so you are able to take the words that we've already put together and make it really, really simple to get out to your audience. So this is an example of what that survey might look like. The subject line makes it very clear that it's about the donor. You want to check in with them, see how they're feeling. Your start of the email reiterates that. And then this second paragraph serves the purpose of really humanizing you and also having an element of reciprocity. So the example we put together is, personally, I'm often feeling both grateful for extra time with my children and tearing my hair out over all being cooped up together. So it's likely that your supporters are also feeling a wide variety of emotions right now. And by telling them a little bit about how you're feeling, it's going to make them more eager to share with you how they're feeling as well. The next paragraph says again that you really want to know how best to support them, and then just asking them to share some information so you can get to know them a little bit better. Really clear call to action, close it out with some contact information. So again, humanizes it a little bit, gives them an opportunity for connection, and that's the whole email. And again, this template is available to you on the resources page. All right, so in the survey itself, a few things to keep in mind when you're putting it together. You want to keep roughly 90% of your questions multiple choice. If someone goes to a survey and they see, 5-paragraph text box questions, they're going to get really overwhelmed and probably not want to put together that many open-ended answers. If they see a lot of checkboxes, yes, no, sliders, multiple choice, it feels a lot easier and more approachable. You want to open your survey with a very empathetic kind of tone, again, asking them how they're feeling, how they've been affected, and building a connection to your organization. So we call these priming questions. We'll show you a few examples of these in a moment. Then once you've gotten them, thinking about why they care about your organization and you've checked in on them personally, you want to gather some of those demographic and contact information pieces. When you're gathering this information, you want to think about what's actionable in terms of building segmentation when you're actually doing the follow-up messaging with the information you've learned from this survey. So loyalty of giving is a really big one. That's something that I think every organization has in its database, how long someone's been giving to them. Things like age, location, and gender may be dependent on your organization. If you're a national versus a local organization, if you have age information on your donor database. But what I would really think about when you're gathering this information is, again, just how are you going to be segmenting? Are you able to build a list of folks who are 60 and older in Minnesota? If so, then you want to get that information. So here are some of those sample questions. That first section, getting to know you. asking them those really empathetic questions about how are you feeling? How is coronavirus affecting you? This might be both economically and health and, in terms of childcare, things like that. Where do you call home? That's getting into some of that demographic information about location. Then you want to move on to those priming questions that we talked about. So this is really getting your respondents to think about, why do they care about your organization? When did they first get involved? How concerned are you about our mission right now? This will serve the dual purpose of more information about your donor base, which can be used for segmenting, but also for putting them in the mindset of what made them originally care about your mission, why they care about it right now, and make them more interested in helping your organization. And then also some of those tactical questions like, how often do you want to hear from us? That's obviously extremely actionable, as well as what medium do you want to hear from us in? Then you want to just continue building on that connection. So now that they're in this mindset, they've sort of felt a personal connection to you, they've thought about why they care about your organization, ask them if they're interested in learning more about helping you. Ask them if coronavirus has made them more or less likely to write a will, which is great for planned giving, give now, give a non-cash gift, different things that are going to give you really actionable follow-ups to know, okay, great, a large portion of our audience is really interested in DAFs right now, is really interested in, helping our coronavirus efforts. Then once you've gotten that information, you're going to close out by gathering contact information. So again, leading with gratitude, you may or may not end up actually building prospect lists from this. So we do recommend keeping the contact information optional so that people can reply anonymously and help you build that aggregate data. But if people do share their info, definitely make sure you follow up with them. We'll talk about this in a moment, but at least a blanket thank you is important. And if someone is saying, hey, yes, I want more information about how to help, make sure that you have a follow-up email to them sharing that information on giving types. This is an example of what a survey might look like. This one in particular, we mocked up for Habitat. It's not an actual survey that we took from their emails, but wanted to use a recognizable name. So starting off with some of those questions about how have you been affected by coronavirus, moving into questions about how long they've been involved with your organization. And then I think there's one more slide of sample questions here. Some of those more tactical things on how can we be helpful to you. So you might have options that range from sharing more information to, do they want a phone call, to do they want more ways about how to support the organization, information about coronavirus specifically, fun and distracting content. A lot of people just, want to be kind of entertained right now. I've gotten some really great emails that have caught my eye on, puppy training videos at home or a virtual walk through the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. The more you know about what your audience wants, the more you can serve it to them. All right, so once you get all of this information, how do you actually put it into action? The first thing you want to do is identify what those key needs are and look for through themes of what people are asking for. We just talked about joy and distraction. So, if you're seeing that people are feeling really overwhelmed and they just kind of want a smile in their inbox, that's really powerful information. Do they want human connection? Are they asking for more virtual events? Are they asking for phone calls? Are they asking for information about other people in your community? Are they asking for a path to impact? Again, this could take multiple forms. It might be planned giving, it might be major giving, it might be non-cash gifts, it might be, a way to have a non-monetary impact, to virtually volunteer. And then you want to group these needs by groups. So again, these are best used when they're actionable in terms of the ways you can actually segment your list. So segmenting, putting those two things together, it might be that your loyal donors want more giving options. It might be that your younger donors want virtual events. All of this is power both for developing your communication strategy and making the case to anyone who needs to sign off on it. I know that we've heard from multiple organizations that there are some disagreements about the best way to reach out to donors at this time. Some boards are feeling extremely cautious and wanting to pause communication or appeals. This is going to be really powerful to help you make the case for why you should be continuing to interact with your donors and how. One really key piece also is when you are actually sending out that messaging after the survey, reference the survey. So it really builds an extra layer of credibility into the information or the type of messaging that you're offering your community. If you're able to preface it by saying, we've heard from people like you, or from alumni like you, or supporters like you, that you want to hear more about the impact of new legislation on giving, for instance, or whatever the thing is that you found from your survey. Referencing that and calling back to it makes it clear that you're really listening. And then finally, don't forget to thank them. We mentioned this earlier, but it's really, really important when someone takes the time, even if it's just a few minutes to fill this out, they can feel really unheard if you don't send out a quick thank you afterwards. So we definitely recommend having even just a very short email message ready to go in the week or so after you send this survey, so you can be sure to express your gratitude for those people choosing to share their insights and their emotions with you. Thank you so much, Patrick.
And thank you, Virginia. I want to double down on this point before we drop off this slide that Virginia made, which I think is so smart, is referencing surveys and future messaging. This really shows that you are a listening organization and that this is a two-way ongoing conversation. It's a really key point, and it will really change the way that people interact and feel close to your organization, which will have a long-term benefit in planned gifts and major giving, and an immediate benefit in annual and major giving as well. So definitely, if you take nothing else away from that, this ability to open up future conversations, and even one-on-one phone calls that said, we've heard from a lot of alumni who want to hear more about different ways to give, that gives you permission to make that phone call or have that conversation or send that email. So it's a really key point, especially as people are feeling a little tentative about messaging. All right, so a couple other ideas, and then we have some really great questions that are already coming in. So if you have questions, pop them into the Q&A section of Zoom. Things will get lost in the chat with so many people here. So some really cool ideas from around the community. We converted our annual dog walk to a virtual walk, which was fun. Pine Mountain sessions at home, connecting art and nature through virtual events on Facebook. So this is just an extra way for people who can't get out to feel more connected, and they'll rush back to that place when they can get out, but also feel more deeply connected from a giving perspective right away. And then soon to release open space bingo on social media with a chance to win prizes. So this is another really cool idea as people are figuring out ways to bring joy and connection. From the Maine Waldorf Community School, we love this. They sent out a video to all their supporters and parents and alumni, et cetera, of what it looks like to actually teach young children at home. And it's a 4-minute video. It has a lot of different images and shifts, but it's really cool insight, and people will feel a lot closer. Many folks who are parents, grandparents, alumni, et cetera, haven't seen inside of a classroom in years. And this is a way to share that pretty quickly. In New Haven, they're doing a virtual heart walk with the AHA over at Yale. And a couple of interesting tips here. This is from the same event. They have a Facebook group. They're doing text messages, which is a really good way to keep people in. They made donations optional. This is a way to really sort of spread involvement, but it's likely that you'll get even more giving if people feel like it's optional as mandatory. So you get a lot more people walking. Yes, some of them won't give, but those people are likely to not walk otherwise. And it's a really good way to sort of share and grow the supporter base. And so then there's more Facebook pages and people posting pictures, et cetera, to really feel that community. I love this from Joe at St. James School in Maryland. So they do something called Friday Contemplative Chapel, and they've been doing that at their school every Friday for, I think, as long as they can remember. And what they've done is they made it virtual so that alums and other people who at one point had that as part of their lives now have it as a regular basis. And it's an art piece or a poem or a musical performance, but people feel more connected to the school they have in years. And for colleges, universities, for K through 12 schools, this is your moment to sort of be a place again for folks that are spread to the winds and scattered across the country. And so this is a really cool way to really hold space for your community in a way that will drive pretty significant giving going forward. So thank you, Joe, for sharing that. Another idea, they had this is from another nonprofit. Their first virtual event, they're a 77-year-old program. So first time they've ever had a virtual event. without a good connection to former board members. And this year we started a past board program. We just had a happy hour and board challenge ask. We're having another one this morning. This was a few days ago with tea. So we'd love to hear more about how that went. But the key insight here is reaching out to past board members who are likely to be a little bit older, probably stuck at home, and may want to be more useful. And so, you may have been, join the organization after they left, but just go out and call and have a stewardship conversation with them. And if they want to get more involved or give more, this is a really good moment. So one to do for everybody this week, the next 2 weeks, is make a list of all past living board members and think about whether or not we can have a conversation with them as a way to generate some significant giving. Okay, this is from the Louisa May Alcott Orchard House. Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women. This is in Concord, Massachusetts. This is a live Facebook conversation with their ED. One thing you'll notice is that she's sideways because it took her a minute to get it oriented the right way. And I wanted to share this because people loved this conversation. And I don't know the name of the woman who's the ED, but she's obviously not the most tech savvy person on the planet, and people still loved it. And it's because it's authentic and real, and you don't have to be, this doesn't have to be magnificently done to pull it off. And all these folks from around the country got to listen in and be a part of it, who definitely wouldn't be back at the house for years, if ever. And it's a great way to really build community. A couple more examples from the Kinixu Land Trust, which is in Idaho, I believe. And they do something they call Solo Govo, which is solo go volunteering. And they're posting videos about how people can help with their land trust while being alone or being with just a partner and socially distancing. So really cool there. And it's really a way to deeply engage with folks and build more connection. For a lot of these environmental organizations, the connections with the place and not the people or the staff. And so it's a way to introduce the staff and build more of a team connection that will lead to a lot more giving. If you've watched a video a couple times with a woman from the Land Trust who's the ED, then when you have either a virtual dinner or going forward, a person got a donation, it will be much, much more powerful because you built that connection. Okay, a couple more ideas. So St. Mary's College is hosting a web series with cooking classes, yoga, professors talk, musical performances, etc., which is really cool. And these are specifically for the Leadership Society and Legacy Society members. So they're able to steward people in a really cool way while giving them this exclusive content, which doesn't take that much work to produce, but it's a cool opportunity. And then Muttville, who we love. So Muttville is an animal shelter, and they're doing news from the mutts while we work from home, which is just a really fun source of joy for a lot of people. And they've got adorable photos like this one. And then one thing I really love.
Hello, beautiful people in the world. I'm Naja. I'm here to tell you, you are beautiful, no matter what anyone says. You are beautiful. That's a wrap, people.
So Make-A-Wish has been doing these incredible videos, both from donors to some of the kids and from kids to the community. That was a 19-second video. It took probably a couple hours to produce because it was really well done, but you could do a little bit less lighting and mic work and not a title and have a very similar outcome in a very short time. So you can imagine what it's like to be at home and get a video like that and feel like, oh, okay, I'm really connected to these kids and I want to do everything I can to help. So amazing job from Make-A-Wish. And I hope those examples will inspire a couple more ideas going forward. So feel free to share them with us and we'll share them with the community. Quick note on a couple other fun events. So we're having a higher ed and environment roundtables coming up later this week. And then also in the survey, if you feel like you want to get involved in a different roundtable from another area, just note it. And if you're willing to speak at that roundtable or help lead it, we'd love to know. These communities have been really wonderful. Frankly, they're a lot of work, so we haven't been doing them weekly, but they're really excellent and a great chance to come together. There's also a bunch of previous recordings so that if you if you're in the animals community or the faith community, or K through 12, et cetera, there's a lot of good ideas that have already been shared, and go check those out. They're between half an hour and an hour and pretty fun. Okay, so a couple of next steps. A bunch of resources that are free for you and available just to make your lives a little better. So email and phone scripts around Giving Tuesday now, email templates and phone scripts for thriving in a crisis generally, an FAQ we built based on all the questions from all the webinars, strategy memos, many of you have seen that. We created new survey templates and emails so that you can just use those. Those are now on the strategy page thanks to my colleague Simone, who's been working so hard. We put up the trivia night template on the resources page as well. So if you want to run one of these, we've done most of the work for you. And then lastly, just much more. So if there's things that you feel like you really need, please ask. The second note is that Giving Tuesday is next Tuesday. And if you're scrambling, just shoot me an email, and someone on our team who's an expert in the area of what you do will hop on the phone with you gladly or respond to your email. So we know you're moving very quickly in many cases, and so just let us know if we can be useful at all. All right, couple last steps. So first things first, my colleague Simone is pasting the survey in the Zoom chat right now. This is really important you fill out, don't mind. Feedback, RSVP's CFRE credit. It's also how we can make sure to get you the templates that we've talked about. Now that you know how to do these things, it will be really helpful to you to have all the text and everything else you need. So please, please fill that out and take a few moments right now. We are not doing a webinar next week. So this is the first week in 2 months or so that we're not going to do one, and it's because it's Giving Tuesday next week. So instead of talking to me and talking to each other, go call your donors. We'll be back in 2 weeks with some tips on how to keep your team productive and happy, and a whole bunch more examples from around the nonprofit landscape. And then if you have creative ideas that you want to share, or if you need anything, just shoot me an email. So let's go to questions. And thanks for everyone for sitting through that. All right, so our first question, how should we be thinking about the fall? Should we cancel our fall galas? Quite possibly, yes. It's very unlikely that you're going to build an event with a lot of older folks in the fall. And let's presume that a decent population is older than 16. At the very least, you want to plan a virtual event so that if you need to fall back on it come July or August, that you do that. Second question, everybody's email load has increased. How do we not be part of the problem? I would actually suggest that this is part of the don't decide for your donors moment. And so if you are working, you are likely getting a lot more emails because your boss isn't stopping by your desk. But if you're at home, people are really hungry for more content. And actually in some of the feedback we've gotten from nonprofits, people talk about how much their donors are welcoming more communication. So I wouldn't think of it as a big problem just because it's something that you feel. Remember that you're both working and dead center in the middle of the nonprofit world, and most people won't have the same experience. We have a question. Do you have a recommendation for a survey tool that is inexpensive and a quick ramp up? Virginia, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. So there's a few good ones out there. We have done a ton of research and kind of found a couple of standouts. One of those is Google Forms. Very, very simple to use. Patrick mentioned earlier a couple of the folks doing virtual events and things, people who are not super tech savvy. I fall into that category. I'm not necessarily a tech genius, but I find Google Forms very simple. SurveyMonkey would be the other one, also very easy. Both of those have some really good analysis tools already built in as well that make it very easy to understand your survey results.
Great. Do you anticipate another Giving Tuesday during the traditional time in November 2020? Yes. So Giving Tuesday announced that there will be one. I believe it's the first week of December because we have a late Thanksgiving this year. But Giving Tuesday, normal Giving Tuesday is still full on. what is the Fidelity charitable report that we discussed briefly earlier? So Fidelity just ran a survey and they published it in some news outlets. Feel free to Google Fidelity charitable report. We can also see if we can track it down and share a link in the follow-up email. And just make sure you fill out the survey so we can get that, that follow-up email to you as well. On survey strategy, are you hoping to gather general data, or should you try and link individual responses back to individual donors? Virginia, do you want to take this one as well?
Sure. So I would say both are totally valid, but in the spirit of doing things sort of quick and dirty, and none of us have a ton of extra time on our hands, it's totally fine just to get that general info. If you are collecting donor info and providing a place for them to say, yes, I'd like more information, then you should be prepared to follow up with them on a personal level. But it's totally fine not to include that question. So the main goal of the surveys we're talking about is getting general information. If you want to build prospect lists and you have the bandwidth to follow up with people individually, then that's also great.
Yeah. This is a question, it's a really interesting one. Can you provide examples for hospitals where HIPAA is a limiting factor of sharing what's going on inside the hospitals? So HIPAA, which is privacy compliance for healthcare information, means that you can't go around with a camcorder and just film everything happening in a hospital. What you can do is pull a doctor aside or a general expert and have a looser conversation about that, or sort of take photos of doctors and nurses who are not necessarily with patients. And UNICEF, I think, has actually done this really well, where they're using photos of the frontline workers around the world that are helping out, and they seem to be generating a considerable amount of fundraising. So think about heroicizing doctors and nurses instead of showing patients, and you may want to, take those photos right outside the hospital even to avoid risk there. Really, really great question. How many responses do we get to feed this data? Between 1 and 200 organizations RSVP'd, or rather responded to the survey. So that will give you a sense of the scope. There's a question on survey size recommendation. It's a lot of response data to analyze, or is the intention to gather general responses rather than specific? So general responses are great. You might expect to see, depending on the activity of your email list, is between a 1 and 5% response rate. So 10,000 means you get between 100 and 500 responses. This will really allow you enough granularity to see some trends, both at a macro level and a little bit at a micro level, especially if you're in a few hundred as well. But really, we think surveys are, as Virginia said earlier, they're great for lead gen. They're also really, really good business intelligence tool. And most people are flying blind right now. So having that level of insight will be really, really useful. I mean, we wouldn't shy away from going too large there. There's a question on the PPP loans. And maybe this will make this the last question. If you have a healthy reserve and are smaller, does it feel like we should be thoughtful and leave it for those who are in jeopardy? So the PPP loans don't have a separate allocation for 501c3s. They go across all small businesses. And as you've probably seen in the news, places like the Cheesecake Factory have been grabbing the loans for their franchises. So I wouldn't, if you feel like you can use the money and put it to good use, I would go take it. Because even just having an additional money going to paycheck replacement allows you to free up more work for whatever your mission is. And so definitely use it. It's not as though there's a separate nonprofit pool and you'll be taking money away from another nonprofit. It's more likely that it will go to a different business otherwise. And we think if this pool runs out, Congress may allocate further money. So definitely make the use of this. The same logic could be used for grants, and you're still applying for grants that wouldn't go elsewhere. So definitely do it. Okay, let's wrap up there. So it's the first time in a while that I won't see you next week, but I wanted to thank everybody for joining. Big thank you to Virginia for joining as well. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. But really good luck with Giving Tuesday. Make the most of it. And if you need any help at all, just shoot us an email. So see you soon, and thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.